Welcome to Growth Quest, the business and personal growth podcast for those of us who want to make something of ourselves. The podcast of the next century where iron sharpens iron. I am your host, Mel Solomon, and this is my very first episode. Please welcome my special guest, Ryan Silver. If you want to tell them a little bit about yourself, you can go ahead and do that.
Sure. Solomon's pleasure being on. I'm honored being the first guy here. So I'll do you right. Real quick and easy, because I know there's a bunch of stuff that we want to dive into. I come from a business family. Restaurants, real estate. I've done it all in the restaurant business. I've done a lot of stuff in terms of real estate, title insurance, finance. Had my own companies for a period of time during the crash, and we did really, really well because we knew the market, knew what to do. And it's been a very interesting, time since 2008 when I had the companies.
Yeah.
From not only just from being a young business owner, but also, the political thing all started going on in 2008, with Obama fundamentally transforming America forever. So it was really interesting just to kind of see how some of the, things that we're going to touch on from that point up until, today, how they're changing, how they haven't changed. Right now I just do consulting. I do some business consulting. I do some real estate stuff on the side. Right now I'm kind of doing like underwriting work for a large company. I can't say who, but basically we package a bunch of loans, make sure the loans are within compliance, and then we sell them to Fannie and Freddie.
So you do have those 2008 stories.
Subprime, man. I'll just put it to you this way. It's the individual, you know what I mean? Yep. And you're either going to be ethical or you're not. And in 2008 with derivatives, subprime lending, no income doc loans. You just had people doing just unethical things, and people had no business having homes, to be quite frank. And at the same time, those underwriters shouldn't have been approving these loans. Like if your debt to income, you couldn't afford this loan because you had high debt, bad credit. Sure. Let's jack up your interest rate because you're a high credit risk and make your payments so much that you can. It was crazy, man. It was crazy, but it was the individual, unfortunately. So, regulation's a good thing if there's not too much of it, but it always boils down to the individual.
So I myself am a landlord, and I unfortunately had to learn the hard way. I got my first house and was 2016, 2017 ish. And lived in it for a little bit and then rented it out, but we'll get into that. So Ryan, if you can let us in on how long you've been in your particular industry.
Long time. I got involved in real estate when I was 25. Didn't have my real estate license. Just kind of used my resources, my contacts to, bounce some ideas off of. My very first deal was a single family row home in Fishtown right before the market crash. And I bought it right because when the market crashed, I only lost $15,000, $20,000 worth of equity. Not that bad compared to all these other people. I got a lot with the purchase. I did a subdivision because I figured out that there was this, it was an irregular shaped backyard. It ran block to block. So I just knocked on the people, on the block behind me. And I said, your backyard is right next to my home and my lot. Let's subdivide it, not verbatim, but that's basically what I said. So my very first thing was, a minor subdivision and, building two new single family row homes in Philly. Had my own real estate, title insurance, mortgage company and property casualty insurance company, fully RESPA compliant, because when you're offering all those different types of services and, you have four, entities bringing in money. And if someone chooses to use all four, you have to disclose this company is making this much. Well, first off, I own these, these are all my companies and here's all the money that we're making. So it's, fully disclosure, everything like that. And we did very well for the 4 or 5 years that we were open. Some files, man, we would, if you represented a real estate, I did have my license when I had the companies because I had to get it. And sometimes, man, if you did a real estate transaction, title insurance, and a mortgage loan, I mean, you could be making $10,000-$15,000 a file because you'd be hitting on all three of those things. So it was a lot of fun. Made a lot of connections. Learned a ton about hard money lending. Which is where you don't want to go through the whole 2-3 month process, month 2 process of getting financing for a construction project or a rehab, and you go to a hard money lender, and it's hard money for a reason. They charge 10%, 12%, some of them 15%, points and stuff like that. But you buy the property right, what you're doing. You'll have the factors in there to cover any type of shortfall. One super important thing with me, with my investors, is if you say something to someone, they're going to take your word for it.
Exactly.
If this is what we're making, we're going to make $250,000 on it. Oh, you better not make 247.50 on it, man. If you don't make that, oh, you said 250. So my thing was always, I gave 3 scenarios. I gave, fire sale, like the oh crap. I gave the middle, and I also gave, the best possible solution. So that way they had all 3. And if it fell within that range, I told you, like, this is the price range that I told you. So it was a very interesting experience from a young age, being a company owner from 28 to 33. A lot of old people don't like hearing the facts of life and things from a young buck. And
it's true.
They'll treat you different and they'll disrespect you, but you keep a cool head and you just be yourself and just be a professional. It usually worked out.
So people who might tune in that don't necessarily know anything about investments yet, that don't know anything about real estate yet, and they want to get into it, can you briefly explain what equity is?
Well, equity is, there's a lot of ways that you could dissect it. From a sale or you're keeping the property perspective, and there's a couple other ways, but I don't want to get into those because they're a little bit more complicated. But basically, equity is you have your after repair value. All right, so say your after repair value is 250, and you get a loan for, I don't know, $170. The difference from the 250 repair value appraisal less what your mortgage is, that's your equity. You can leverage that, which I don't really, you got to really know what you're doing, and you got to have, the resources to be able to do that. But that in essence, that's pretty much all that it is. It's what the appraisal value is less your mortgage, and that's your equity. Now, a lot of people got in trouble in 2008 to 2010. Well, excuse me, prior to that, but then 2008 when everything came due. And that was because people were maxing out their equity. And that's a dangerous thing. You try and want to keep it under 80. Nowadays, most lenders, unless it's a first time home buyer, you do the FHA thing and do a very little bit down. You can go that route, but then you're automatically like over 90%, you already have a loan to value of like 90 something percent, which is fine. But, you're going to be in that house for a while, no one stays in a home for 30 years nowadays. I don't know anybody for that. Well, then again, I'm 39. So, I don't know that many people that have owned a house for 30 years. That's not a young person. That's not necessarily the thing to do. The more money down that you can put into it, that'll also leave you, more equity, because then you're not relying on the lender to lend you the money. And
that was my next question too.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, man. You didn't send me anything. I'll show you my emails right now. But I'm just talking. And for, if you're an investor, those banks and some of these hard money guys, they want you to have skin in the game. They don't want you to be like, oh, just give me a loan, 80%, it's 50% acquisition. The other 20, 30% is for my construction. They're going to want you to put, 10, 15, maybe 20 grand into it. So that way they know that, you're not just going to, possibly just walk from it or have no problem. They want you to have skin in the game.
Yep.
And again, if you put money into it, there's a bunch of different ways that you can evaluate it, but you're in essence creating equity for yourself by putting that money up. And, that really comes down to what are you comfortable with? What's your plan? is it an investment property? Is it, I mean, there's a lot of other factors that can come into play with that.
So I got my first house, like I was saying, in 2016, 2017. And it wasn't meant to be an investment property. That was supposed to be like my forever home. And then I'll get into the actual nitty gritty of it as time progresses. But it came to it where I had to leave the house like ASAP, right? I still owned the house, but I had to move out, and I had to replan and reorganize my life and make things happen in a way that didn't include the house. And I had to literally do it within probably about 3 weeks time span, right? So I got a place somewhere else, total another state from where I own my house. And then I had to start looking for somebody I wanted to rent. So I didn't find anybody, and it was in like prime real estate too. Prime real estate, somebody should have picked it up, but I didn't find anybody in the first week and a half, 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden somebody pops up. And I was like, all right, I gotta be out next week. This person pretty much has a semi-stable lifestyle. They have a job that gives them healthcare. They have a job that gives them salary, and it's enough of a salary where they can pay the rent that I was charging on time. Lo and behold, about 2 months into it, no rent shows up. I was like, all right, I'll give them till next week to be nice. No rent during the next week. So I tried to call them that during that second week. They don't pick up. So I'm in a total other state, mind you, at this point. So it's not like I can swing by the house and knock on a door. So I send people over that I still know in that area. They knock on the door. Nobody's there. There's no car in the driveway. So I'm figuring now it's abandoned property. Now I'm like, how can I work this abandoned property thing? I just made a multi-state line move. I don't have much money behind me right now. I can't even get a lawyer to work for me down in Florida, right? So now my pockets are completely empty. Finally, one of their family members calls me and says, oh, your tenant is in jail right now. Which causes a whole nother plot of problems. So they're in jail. Of course, under Florida rules, now I have a way to get in contact with them. I'll confirm that they're in jail. Now I can say, hey, if they don't have their stuff out by this time, then it'll be considered abandonment, whatever Florida's. But at that point, you still have to go through certain court cases and all of that other stuff, right? Mind you, my late fees are now just piling up because this is about a month and a half into it, right? Come to find out that from that family member that this person had 2 other adults living in the house.
Ooh.
And under the lease, they weren't supposed to.
Ooh.
So as I'm trying to kick these 2 other adults out, I find out that I can't kick these adults out because they've been squatting and I have no
rights.
Exactly.
Rights. Yeah.
So as a landlord who owns this property, I have no legal bounds over my own property. So now I have 3 separate people that I have to take to court. I have to take the people she invited into the house to court, and I have to take her to court. Mind you, she's in jail because she turned out to be, even though she maintained a good solid position at her job, she turned out to be a meth head. When I finally got the house cleaned out, they were finding like bowls that had like meth residue in it and all of this other stuff. But end of the story, right? Long story short, my second tenant, God bless this person's soul, she went and she cleaned the house out. She gutted everything. She got it back up to code, cleaned everything out the way it's supposed to be cleaned out. Amazing, amazing person, right? And moved in there and everything. She's always turned rent in on time and all of that other stuff. So pretty much I've lost a whole lot of my money out of my pocket. And I know they say that what is it? Bull markets make people give people money, but bear markets make people rich. You know what I mean? I didn't even get to experience that analogy because I bought it during really a bear market waiting for the bull to come up, and I still haven't gotten, because I'm still down off of all of the repairs that I had to pay for, off of all of the late fees that accumulated. It broke my pockets. So with that being said, real quick, what is something that you recommend to newbies in the game so that they don't get to experience my story?
Well, first off, man, most people don't have the balls to say what happened to them. Like, you hear about all the success stories, and not many people will ever tell you what you just said. I'll share just one real brief example. A tenant just destroyed my house, and I got the permits, and the township municipality called me. I got more permits for more things, and they called me, and they sent me letters. So they had my phone number, they had my emails, and they had my address. Tenant destroys my property, and the next thing I know, I get letters saying, we got a warrant out for your arrest. You need to pay these fines. And I'm like, you guys have all my, you could call me for all this stuff and email me for this stuff and write letters to me for all this stuff, and you didn't even give me notice. But of course, you're the property owner. Doesn't matter. It does not matter that they knocked on that lady's door and they told that lady, hey, you need to, clean up all the stuff that you have out in the front yard and backyard. Doesn't matter. You're the property owner. So my advice would be, it's not a given, and nothing's a guarantee in life. And if you don't take the risk, there's no reward. You're either going to be an entrepreneur and take that chance. I mean, I believe me, dude, I've failed. Like, there are a couple things that I failed on, and it cost me a lot of freaking money. Now, granted, it wasn't anything that I did. In title insurance, you have a thing called defalcations. So basically, I would have access to like $50-20 million like every month, a lot of money. And I didn't touch a cent of it because I had a fiduciary obligation. That money is to go to pay off IRS liens and, mortgages and tax liens and taxes. I never touched a cent. But, some bad people did some bad things, and they touched, millions of dollars, and they shut down a couple of underwriters of ours. And it cost me a lot of money. It cost me I had to short sale 2 properties. So, there's nothing that's a given in life. And if you're going to get involved in real estate, you need to understand, first off, there's a good chance you're not going to survive. And that's just the fact. It's just a fact, man. I've seen so many people become real estate agents, and so many of them leave, and it's so many people want to be a real estate investor, and so many people only do it for a little bit of time and they leave. It is a hard business. My thing is, you need to make sure, number one, you got a good contractor. You got a contractor. If you're doing rehabs, you got to have a contractor that you can trust. And the most important thing about that contractor, other than that they do good work, they have completed operations coverage on their insurance. That means that once they complete the property and something, a pipe burst or something like that they just did. If you just did a whole new plumbing thing in my building, in my 6-unit building, and you just did all the plumbing for it and it's brand new, I shouldn't have pipes, leaking. So you're going to do one of two things. One, you're going to fix it. Or two, I'm going to call your insurance company and I'm going to make a claim, and then your errors and emissions is going to go up. So you tell me the path that you want to go. That's a very important thing, completed operations coverage. So number one, have a good contractor. Two, make sure that contractor has completed operations coverage. Three, you got to know where you're buying. You got to know where your market. And if you're not totally sure about where the good areas are and this, that, and the other thing, you need to find a good real estate agent. You really, really do. And that's a whole nother conundrum unto itself, because, you gotta, nowadays with all the technology and things, you can really find who's a really, really good agent and who's kind of someone, oh, we got to talk to Tom, here you go, Tom, here's your first, call or whatever. Networking, you got to know who you're working with. But if you don't know, the areas, you got to get in bed with the right people that do know the right areas. And the most important thing is, you got to make sure that you have enough money to cover the downfalls and to cover the situations and things like that happen to you. Like you said, you're still kind of paying for it. You know what I mean? There's some things that I'm still paying for. And it was something that, had I just had the experience, but I was young and I didn't. So now that I'm older, I would know that, maybe I shouldn't buy this property. Maybe I shouldn't invest in this, in this new venture, because the other investments that I have right now that are working for me, something could happen to one of them.
Yeah.
You know,
And they're working.
and that's the whole thing. Basically, what I'm saying is don't over leverage yourself. And you're the only person that knows how much money you have, well, you should know this if you're getting involved in investments. If you don't, you've got an issue. Only you can tell, how much money you need to carry something. And you should always have a fallback plan, a pitfall. You should always have those reserves to make sure that your investments are going to be protected, and just don't spread yourself too thin. That's the most important thing, man. Because if you spread yourself, if you're going to piss in the snow, you're going to aim in one spot, and that's where you're going to make a hole. If you just start, spraying everywhere, you're not going to make a hole. And if that's your style, and you know what, if you got the money to do it, God bless you. If you don't care that some, goes from a return rate of 15 or 20% down to like an 8, and that's cool with you, man, more power to you. That's you. That's not me. So, know who you're working with, know your contractor, know the market, network, and make sure the people that you're working with have a great track record. And the most important thing is, realize that this business is not for everyone, and most people will not survive it. And never spread yourself out too thin. Always protect your investments that you have, and make sure that, when your money's right and you're ready to move on to something else and you have that cushion, that's when you make the next step. Just, don't over leverage yourself. Don't ever spread yourself too thin.
So I'll give one of my secrets, and I'll try to give a secret an episode. The reason why I bought the house where I bought my house was because what I realized was the area that it was in, although it was at that point in time extremely small town, you can literally split the town based off of where the crime was going to be at. On the east side of the town, you were going to have mainly the meth addicts. On the west side of the town, you're going to have the crack addicts. And that's literally how it was split across one road, right? But what I did realize when I decided to buy my house was you had companies like Lockheed Martin moving in. You had Boeing moving in. You had Kroger build not Kroger. You had Publix build a second Publix further up north in that town, followed by Winn-Dixie building a second Winn-Dixie further up north in that town, followed by several other huge contractors that work alongside like GE and other places. Then I saw hotels coming up, and I was like, this is where I should get it while it's cheap. And I got mine for $160, and at this point I can sell it for $195, almost $200. I get in there for $160. 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot is now up to almost $200. You know what I mean?
Well, you said something that's very important, and actually I should have probably said this in the beginning. Buy cheap. Buy cheap. And if you're doing, what you did and identified those markets, buying cheap, that's the way to go. If you have the money and you can start throwing your weight around with the big boys, buying stuff at 200 and 250 a square foot, you know what I mean? And if you got the cash and you can do that, that's cool. But if you're just starting out, there's nothing wrong with starting out low. The other thing too, and I'm sorry, I should have said this, is I wouldn't say never say never, but buy multiple units. Buy duplexes, triplexes, quads, units. Buy multiple unit buildings, because if you do it right, 3 of them will get rented out, 4 of them will get rented out, and the other 2 are just straight profit, man. And you could most likely live for free. I did that for a little bit, and that was really cool. Multiple units, man. I mean, single family row. I mean, it's all well and good, and there's a lot of money to be made there. But multi units, man. I would. That's where I would sink a lot of my money.
All right. Well, thank you for coming, and
thank you for
blessing us with your knowledge, a plethora of knowledge. I think there's a lot that people can take away from this episode.
I would hope so. If not, man, then they got a lot of knowledge that I don't know, and I don't know anything. I'm pretty stupid and ignorant. So if they didn't take one thing away from this, I'd like to hear from them.
All right. So you have listened to Growth Quest, where iron sharpens iron. If you can, whatever platform you hear this on, please subscribe. Once again, this is my special guest for this episode, Ryan Silver. I'll try to have him back on, and we'll talk about mainly business on the next one, because when I tell you this man is a plethora of knowledge on business, he is a plethora of knowledge on business. So thank you guys for listening this far in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or week whenever you hear this. Later.
Be safe.